Hello, and welcome back to Veil Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. They all believe I am dangerous and insane, but I am not. I am only being forced to tell the truth. I know how that sounds. I know the moment I say it, most people stop listening. They hear the word aliens, and their minds close like a locked door. They decide I am sick, broken, delusional, or desperate for attention. Some of them look at me with fear, some with pity, some with hate, but none of them look at me like I am telling the truth. At the risk of you not believing me either, I will start at the beginning. It is an old story, really. A girl with no real family falls in love with a boy who has everything she has ever wanted. A warm house, loving parents, a dinner table where people actually ask how your day was and care about the answer. A place where you do not have to keep your bags half packed in case someone decides they do not want you anymore. I fell in love with Parker. Not just Parker, though. I fell in love with his family, too. I had been in and out of foster homes since I was 2 years old. I do not remember my first real home, if I ever had one. Most of my childhood is a line of different bedrooms, strange kitchens, new schools, and adults who called me difficult whenever I needed more than a bed and a plate. Sometimes the homes were not terrible. Sometimes the people tried. But most of the time, I was treated like a problem that came with paperwork. Still, I refused to let that become all I was. No matter how many schools I changed, I worked hard. I stayed near the top of my classes. I studied when everyone else slept. I read under blankets with a cheap flashlight when foster parents yelled at me for keeping lights on. If I lost sleep, that was fine. If I had no social life, that was fine too. If my clothes did not fit, if dinner was skipped, if the adults in the house fought all night, if someone threatened to kick me out because I forgot to wash a plate or said the wrong thing, I told myself that was fine. Education was the only thing that mattered. School was my way out, my way to a better life, my way to become someone no one could throw away. That was all I cared about until senior year when I met Parker. I could tell you about the first day we spoke. I could tell you how easy it was to laugh with him, how gentle his voice was, how he listened like every word I said mattered. I could describe how meeting his mother was the first time I understood what maternal love was supposed to feel like. I could tell you how Parker's father became the closest thing to a father I had ever known, not by giving speeches or making big promises, but by showing up, by remembering what snacks I liked, by checking my tires, by telling me he was proud of me when I passed exams. I could talk about those things forever, but none of them matter now. They are all dead, not just dead. They were butchered by beings from outer space right in front of me. Many months ago, before anyone called me a murderer, before doctors strapped me to a bed, before my whole life became white walls, medicine, and screaming, I was standing upstairs in Parker's family home when his father called for me. Maddie, he shouted from downstairs. "You got a package." I didn't order anything, I called back, already moving toward the stairs. But I'm happy to accept a wonderful bounty of what I hope are sweets. A wonderful bounty indeed, Parker's mother sang from the living room. "Come quickly, dear," I smiled as I hurried down. I expected to find Parker waiting with a box of Belgian chocolates or maybe those French pastries I loved. He was always doing sweet things like that. He remembered every little detail. If I mentioned liking something once, he found a way to surprise me with it later. But when I reached the living room, I stopped so suddenly I almost tripped. Parker was down on one knee. He was holding a ring box open in his hands. His mother stood on one side of him. His father stood on the other. Both of them were smiling. And for a moment, my mind could not understand what I was seeing. It felt too perfect, too beautiful, too much like a life that belonged to someone else. Then, Parker said my name. I do not even remember the exact words he used. I know that sounds terrible, but all I remember is the look in his eyes and the way his hands trembled slightly as he held the ring. I remember his mother crying. I remember his father wiping his eyes like he was pretending not to. I screamed yes before Parker had even finished. "Yes," I said, throwing myself into his arms. 1,000,000 times yes. The rest of the evening was everything you would expect after a proposal. We opened an expensive bottle of champagne that Parker's parents had been saving for a special occasion. His mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. His father kept saying, "Welcome to the family," over and over again. Like he knew those were the words I had been waiting my whole life to hear. We celebrated late into the night. At some point, everyone went to bed. I should have slept too, but I could not. My mind was too full. My heart felt too big for my chest. I kept looking at the ring on my finger in the darkness, turning my hand slightly so it caught the faint moonlight from the window. After a while, I quietly slipped out of bed. I walked through the house without turning on the lights. I knew the place well enough by then. I moved down the stairs slowly, careful not to wake anyone. The house was peaceful, warm, safe, at least I thought it was. I went into the living room and looked at the family photos on the walls. There were so many of them. Parker as a baby. Parker on his first day of school. Parker with missing teeth. Parker in a baseball uniform. Parker at graduation. His parents on their wedding day. Grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, family vacations. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. A whole legacy. And now I was going to be part of it. I sat on the couch and stared at the photos, smiling to myself. I imagined Parker's ancestors accepting me. I imagined his living relatives smiling at me at the wedding. I imagined a future where I was not the girl from foster care anymore. I would be a wife, maybe one day a mother. I would have a family of my own. It had taken 23 years, but I was finally going to belong somewhere. Then, I felt something in the room with me. At first, I thought Parker had woken up and come to find me. I turned toward the recliner that his father always used. Something was sitting in it. For 1 second, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. It looked like the kind of alien a child might draw after watching old movies. Its skin was green. Its head was long and oval-shaped. Its fingers were thin and at least twice as long as a human's. Its mouth was only a small slit. Its eyes were large, black, and shining. It had a flat, reptile-like nose, and even though it was sitting down, I could tell it was tall. Over 6 feet, easily, its body was thin and wiry, and it wore a black, one-piece suit that looked almost like leather. I knew it was not a statue or toy because its chest moved. Slowly, quietly, like it was breathing. For a moment, I laughed softly. Of course I was dreaming. That was the only answer. I had been overwhelmed by the proposal, the champagne, the joy, and my own fear of finally having something to lose. My mind had built this strange scene out of stress and excitement. So I sat there and stared at the creature, waiting for the dream to begin. The alien stared back. Neither of us moved. After what felt like about 30 seconds, it spoke. Its voice was robotic and flat, with no emotion at all. I am going to kill this family tonight. Cold spread through me. It started in my fingertips and rushed down to my toes. Still, some stupid part of me held on to the idea that this was a dream. I stayed still and hoped I would wake up. The alien tilted its head. I believe it read my mind. "You are not dreaming," it said. "I am going to kill this family tonight, and you are going to take the blame for it. No new family for you. You will suffer until the day you die." The cold inside me turned into fire. I screamed for Parker. The alien looked almost relaxed. "Thank you for retrieving him for us," it said. "We are not the best with stairs." That sentence made my stomach drop. I looked around the room, but I did not see any others. That did not mean they were not there. They could have been anywhere in the house. Upstairs, in the kitchen, in the hallway. Waiting, I instantly regretted calling for Parker. He came running down the stairs with a baseball bat in his hands. He must have grabbed it from beside the bedroom door. He rushed into the living room and stopped right in front of the alien. "What the hell is that?" Parker yelled. Then he moved to me first, checking my face and arms like he thought I had been hurt. "I'm fine," I said, my voice rising in panic. "Parker, you all have to leave. This thing is going to kill everyone." The alien answered before Parker could. "We are not killing everyone," it said, "just the family. And you are going to take the blame for it." "Like hell she is," Parker said. He lifted the baseball bat and swung as hard as he could. The bat cracked against the alien's large head. Nothing happened. The alien did not fall. It did not cry out. It barely moved. Then it stood. It was even taller than I thought. Its oval head nearly touched the ceiling. Parker stepped back, but only for a second. "Run," he shouted at me. "Get out of here." Before I could move, Parker's parents came down the stairs. They must have heard the yelling and the crash. They reached the bottom just as two more aliens, identical to the first, stepped out of the kitchen. Parker's father barely had time to react before one of the kitchen aliens grabbed him around the shoulders. The other grabbed Parker's mother from behind. The alien in front of Parker snatched the baseball bat from his hands, threw it aside, and locked one long arm around Parker's neck in a sleeper hold. "Get your hands off my wife." Parker's father yelled, struggling against the creature. "What the hell is going on here? Get off my son." Then he looked at me. "Run, Maddie." Even then, even when he was in danger, he thought about saving me. But the aliens were too strong. Parker fought. His father fought. His mother cried and struggled. None of it mattered. Their captors held them like they were children. "What do you want?" I screamed. "Why are you doing this?" No answer. "Please," I begged from where I stood near the couch. "Please leave them alone. Don't hurt them." Please, for one foolish moment, I thought my begging had worked. The aliens turned their heads toward one another. Their expressionless faces gave nothing away, but there was something like consideration in the way they paused. They tilted their heads, then nodded together. At the same time, they let Parker and his parents go. Relief rushed through me. It lasted less than a second. Then the aliens reached out again with those two long fingers and grabbed the arms of the humans they had just released. There was a crunch, then a wet, ripping sound. Then, blood. They tore their arms off. All three of them. Parker, his mother, his father. The aliens pulled their arms from their sockets with the ease of children breaking the limbs off dolls. Time stopped. Blood sprayed across the living room. It splashed the couch, the floor, the walls, and the family photos I had been admiring only minutes before. Those beautiful pictures, that history, that proof of love and time and family, were covered in red. Everyone screamed except the aliens. Parker screamed. His mother screamed. His father screamed. I screamed too, but mine was not from physical pain. It was from something worse. It was the pain of watching the people I loved suffer and knowing I could not stop it. I hated that the aliens had told me their plan. I hated that they made me understand what was coming. Why could they not have killed all of us quickly? Why could they not have let us go to sleep and never wake up? If they wanted Parker and his parents dead, why did they have to make me watch? I wanted to be with his family, in life or death. The aliens did not react to the screams. They simply held Parker and his parents upright by the shoulders, keeping them standing even as blood poured from the places where their arms had been. I cried so hard my face burned. I wanted to run to Parker. I wanted to kiss him one last time. I wanted to hold him, even though there was no way to hold someone who had just been torn apart. I wanted to die beside him. But my legs would not move. My body betrayed me. All I could do was scream and cry. Later, I learned from the police report that the screaming lasted about 2 minutes. The neighbors heard it. Those 2 minutes became part of the evidence. 2 minutes of human suffering while the aliens stood there, calm and silent, holding them up like broken puppets. Even through their pain, Parker and his parents told me to run. "Go!" Parker screamed. "Maddie, run!" His father shouted. His mother could barely speak, but she tried. I did not want to be blamed for this. I did not want to live without them either. In that moment, I decided I would escape and then end my life within the hour. I am not proud of that thought, but it is the truth. I could not imagine a world where they were dead and I remained. Finally, my body moved. I stood up. Parker smiled through the pain. It was small, weak, filled with blood and horror, but it was a smile. He believed I was going to survive. In my mind, I sent him one last kiss. Then I turned to run. As soon as I turned away, I heard 3 soft cracks, then silence, then bodies falling to the floor. I did not have to see it to know what had happened. They had snapped their necks. All 3 of them died at the same moment. A fast death was the least cruel thing those monsters did that night. "Why did you do this?" I screamed, turning back toward them. The aliens acted like I was not there. Each one looked down at their human victim. Then, each placed one foot on the torso and bent down to grab a leg. "Leave them alone." I screamed. I felt spit fly from my mouth. "Stop it. You've done enough." Another snap. Another wet pop. They pulled off the left legs first. Then, a few seconds later, they pulled off the right legs. One of the aliens produced several black garbage bags from somewhere. I do not know where they had been kept. It handed them to the others. Then they began casually gathering the limbs and placing them into the bags. I watched in horror as the people I loved were treated like trash to be collected. Then, one alien seemed to remember that I existed. It walked over and held out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. "You can live and be responsible for this," it said in that flat, robotic voice. "Or you can end it now and be with this family you wanted so badly." I stared at the vial. Then I grabbed it and threw it across the room. It hit the floor but did not break. I spat in the alien's face. "Liar," I screamed. "Why would I believe you would give me an easy way out? You already said I'm going to take the blame for this." The alien made a grinding sound. It took me a moment to understand. It was laughing. That thing had the nerve to be amused. Another alien picked up the unbroken vial and walked toward me. The one I had spat on placed a long arm across my shoulders, holding me in place. I fought, but it was useless. The second alien opened the vial and forced it into my mouth. I tried not to swallow. It pinched my nose shut with those long fingers. My chest burned. My body panicked. Finally, I swallowed. The liquid went down cold. They let me go. What was that? I screamed, gagging and spitting. I tried to make myself vomit, but then I realized they had dropped me right beside Parker's body and the bodies of his parents. After that, I barely noticed the aliens leaving. All I could do was crawl to Parker. I held his head and what was left of him and cried over him. His face was frozen in that last smile he had given me. The smile that said he believed I would get away. Then I heard sirens. "Police," I realized my time was almost up. The aliens had told the truth. I was going to take the blame. If I was lucky, I thought, maybe I would get the death penalty. If I was unlucky, I would get life in prison and have to wait decades before I saw Parker and his parents again. I suddenly stood and ran toward the kitchen. I needed a sharp knife. I do not want to explain exactly what I planned to do with it. You can guess. But the floor was covered in blood. My feet slipped out from under me. I fell hard on my shoulder, and pain shot through my body. I lay there, trying to breathe through it, telling myself I needed just 1 minute before getting up. That minute was enough. The police came through the door. They found me on the floor, covered in blood, surrounded by what was left of Parker and his family. I knew immediately what it looked like. Guns were pointed at me from every direction. Officers shouted at me to stay still, to show my hands, to not move. I cried and told them I was innocent. I told them about the aliens. I told them everything. No one believed me. I was arrested right away. During the investigation, they checked the home surveillance cameras. They checked neighboring cameras that had a view of Parker's house. Every recording showed only us entering the house that day. No strangers, no creatures, no one else. Logically, they said, I was the only person who could have committed the murders. My court-appointed lawyer came to see me after the charges were filed. She was tired-looking, but not unkind. She told me I had two choices. I could keep telling the alien story and spend the rest of my life in a mental hospital. Or I could stop the madness, confess to the murders, and spend the rest of my life in maximum security prison. At first, the choice seemed obvious. Prison would be terrible, but it would still be a life of some kind. I would have a cell, maybe a cellmate, even if that person was dangerous. I would have a routine. I could exercise. I could work. I could keep my head down. I could maybe take classes. I had always loved learning, even if I would never use a degree in the outside world. Maybe I could spend the rest of my life earning prison certificates and degrees, doing anything to keep my mind alive. But a mental hospital was different, especially for someone with no advocate. No family to fight for me. No one outside to ask questions. I knew what would happen. I would be drugged until I could barely think. I would be called too dangerous to move freely. I would be strapped down if I fought. Maybe they would wheel me outside for a few hours of sunlight once a week. Twice, if I was lucky. So, I decided to confess. Not because I killed them. I did not. But because prison sounded less like hell than the place they wanted to send me. I opened my mouth to tell my lawyer I would confess. But the words would not come out. I tried to say, I did it. Instead, my mouth said, aliens killed them. I froze. My lawyer stared at me. I tried again. I told myself to say anything else. I told myself to lie. Again, my mouth told the truth. The alien story came out no matter what I wanted to say. I grew frustrated, then scared, then desperate. In front of my lawyer, I started hitting myself in the head, trying to force the right words out. I thought maybe if I shocked my own brain, I could break whatever was stopping me. Of course, that only made me look crazier. My lawyer called for help. Later, I tried writing a murder confession. I held the pencil and focused on the words I wanted to write. I killed them, but my hand would not obey me. My fingers wrote the truth instead. Aliens killed Parker and his family. I screamed. I broke the pencil. I tried crayons, markers, anything they would give me. Every time, my hand wrote what really happened. Another outburst, another reason to send me to the asylum. At my trial, seeing Parker's extended family nearly broke me. They looked at me like I was a monster and a tragedy at the same time. Some of them hated me. Some of them pitied me. Some believed I had snapped because of my childhood trauma. They thought my mind had created aliens because I could not face what I had done. Hearing about me hitting myself in the head and destroying pencils because they would not write what I wanted made them see me as sick. Not innocent, just sick. It broke my heart. I wanted to tell them I loved Parker. I loved his parents. I would have died for them. I did not hurt them. I would never have hurt them. But my truth only made me look more insane. On the first day of what became the rest of my life in the asylum, I was strapped down. That was when I finally understood. Until then, I had known I was not crazy. I was grieving. Yes, I was broken. Yes, I was drowning in regret. I kept replaying the night in my mind and asking myself what I could have done differently. What if I had not screamed for Parker? What if I had gone upstairs quietly and warned everyone? What if we had climbed out the windows? What if we had not made so much noise? What if Parker's parents had never come downstairs? Maybe they would still be alive. Maybe the aliens would have killed them in their sleep instead. Maybe there was never any way to save them. Those thoughts tore through me every hour. But when the nurse gave me my first heavy dose of sedatives, I had one moment of strange clarity before the medicine dragged me under. The liquid, the clear liquid the aliens forced me to drink. That was why I could not lie. It did something to me. It made it impossible for me to speak anything except the truth about that night. It made it impossible to write anything except what really happened. When the aliens said I would take the blame, I thought they meant prison. I was wrong. They knew no one would believe the truth. They wanted me in an asylum. They wanted me trapped in a place where my truth would be called madness forever. Looking back, I do not even know if I saw their real forms. That thought haunts me almost as much as everything else. They looked exactly like stereotypical aliens from movies and children's drawings. green skin, big black eyes, long fingers, strange suits. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe they chose those forms because they knew how ridiculous it would sound. Maybe they made themselves look like a joke so that anyone who heard my story would dismiss it right away. If this were not so tragic, it would almost be funny. I only had 6 good years in my life. 6 years with Parker. 6 years knowing what it felt like to be loved by a family. 6 years of dinners, birthdays, holidays, quiet evenings, and ordinary kindness. 6 years of being asked if I was warm enough. 6 years of someone saving me the last slice of cake. 6 years of hearing "drive safe" and knowing the person saying it would worry until I got home. At least I had that. At least I knew what it felt like. I do not know why my life was so hard before them. I do not know why those aliens chose Parker's family. I do not know why they chose me to survive. I do not know what they did with the limbs they took in those black garbage bags. I do not know if they are watching me now. Sometimes, during my lucid moments, I try to remember the happy years. I close my eyes and create another life. In that life, the wedding happens. Parker stands at the altar and cries when he sees me. His mother helps me with my dress. His father walks me down the aisle because I have no one else to do it. Everyone smiles. Everyone lives. In that life, I truly become part of their family. Sometimes I imagine brunch on a Sunday morning. Parker making jokes over coffee. His mother humming in the kitchen. His father reading the news and pretending not to listen to gossip. Sometimes I imagine a dance date. Parker spinning me under soft lights while we laugh, because neither of us is very good at dancing. Sometimes I imagine a beach trip. His mother wearing a wide hat. His father complaining about sand. Parker pulling me into the water while I pretend to be annoyed. But it never lasts. No matter what happy scene I build in my mind, the aliens always interrupt. They appear in the middle of the dream. They come into the kitchen, the church, the beach, the dance floor. Then they do it all again. They grab Parker and his parents. They tear them apart. They kill them. They gather their limbs into garbage bags while I stand frozen and helpless, forced to watch the slaughter repeat over and over. Then I wake up seizing. After that, I am strapped down again. Then the sedatives come. That is my life now, barely existing, floating in and out of numbness. Some days I am so drugged I can barely speak. Some days I cannot use the bathroom by myself. Most days I do not understand time. Morning, night, weeks, months, years, they all melt together under the weight of medication. But somewhere inside me, a small part still counts. I am counting down the days until I die. And I am hoping the medicine makes that day come faster. Not because I am dangerous. Not because I am insane. Because the truth is trapped inside me, and no one will ever believe it. Story 2. I am only writing this down because the lack of sleep is starting to make me see things that might not be there. At least, I hope they are not there. I have been awake for so long that my eyes burn every time I blink, and every shadow in the corner of the room seems to move when I stare at it for too long. If I do not get this story out of my head, I think I am going to lose my mind. 2 days ago, I packed up my old Sedona and left Vancouver. My sister had just gotten a job up in Fort St. John, and since she does not drive, I agreed to haul a bunch of her furniture and boxes up the Alaska Highway for her. She had already shipped some of her things, but there was still too much left behind. Boxes of clothes, kitchen supplies, books, a small desk, a few lamps, and the old couch she refused to throw away because she said it was still perfectly good. Honestly, I only agreed because she promised to pay for gas and buy me a huge steak dinner once we arrived. At the time, that sounded like a fair deal. A long solo drive, some peace and quiet, a few sports analytics podcasts, and a free meal at the end. I pictured it like a reset for my brain. Just me, the road, mountains, trees, and time to think. Now I would trade that steak dinner for one good night of sleep and a pair of eyes that did not feel like they had sand behind them. The trip started normally enough. I left Vancouver early with coffee in one hand and my phone plugged into the charger. The van was packed so tightly that I could barely see out of the rear window. Every bump in the road made something shift or rattle behind me. At first, it was annoying, but after a few hours, it became part of the rhythm of the drive. By the time I made it past Prince George and pushed farther toward the mountain passes, the day had already started dying. The sun slipped behind the peaks, leaving the sky a dull gray blue. Soon after, fog began crawling over the pine trees. It came in thin strips at first, drifting between trunks like smoke. Then it thickened until it seemed to press against the road from both sides. My eyes were tired. The van's steering felt heavy and slow on the winding roads. Each curve seemed sharper than the last, and the long inclines made the engine complain. I kept telling myself I could make it a little farther, just to the next town, the next gas station, the next place with lights. But eventually, I knew I was lying to myself. I could not keep driving safely. So I pulled into a muddy gravel turnout off Highway 97. It was nothing more than a rough patch of ground beside the road, surrounded by tall black forest. The pines stood close together, so thick that even with my headlights on, I could not see more than a few feet into them. The fog slid between the trees and made them look like they were shifting slowly in place. I turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt huge. Outside, there were no crickets, no wind, no distant animals, just the metallic pinging of the engine cooling down in the cold mountain air. I checked my phone. No service. Of course, I locked the doors, tilted the driver's seat back as far as it would go, and pulled my heavy winter jacket over my face to block the pale moonlight leaking through the fog. I tried to sleep, but it was useless. Every 20 minutes or so, a logging truck roared past on the highway. The whole van shuddered violently each time, and the blast of wind hit hard enough to make the vehicle rock on its tires. Then the truck would vanish, and the silence would come back even heavier than before. I did not sleep. Not really. I just lay there under my jacket, staring at the dark fabric, feeling how thin the windows were. I kept thinking about the forest around me. I kept thinking about how far I was from help, how easy it would be for something to step out of those trees and stand beside the van without me knowing until it tapped on the glass. By morning, I felt worse than when I had stopped. The next afternoon, the landscape changed again. The trees crowded closer to the shoulder, tall and dense, their branches dark against the sky. The road began twisting upward into the mountains. By 6 in the evening, the sky had turned a bruised purple, heavy and low, like bad weather was pressing down from above. Fog rolled off the peaks and swallowed the asphalt 50 feet ahead of me. I slowed down and leaned forward over the steering wheel, trying to see. My headlights only made the fog glow. Every curve appeared too late. Every dark shape at the side of the road looked like a deer, a person, or a rock face waiting to crush me. To make things worse, my mind kept drifting back to old memories of my sister when we were kids. She used to be terrified of the dark. On bad nights, she would make me sit outside her bedroom door until she fell asleep. I would complain the whole time, but I always stayed. I would sit there with my back against the wall, half asleep, waiting until her breathing slowed. Now I was the one wishing someone was outside my door. My phone signal disappeared completely. There was not even one weak bar, only that empty little circle that says the world has stopped reaching you. To keep myself awake, I turned on the radio and scanned the AM dial. Most stations were static. After a while, I found a faint broadcast buried under crackling noise. It sounded like a late-night talk show, though it was still evening. The host had a low, gravelly voice, and he was interviewing a man who spoke about local folklore and old woods legends. The static kept swelling and fading, swallowing pieces of their conversation. The guest said something about people vanishing in the high passes. Then the static hissed. He said they were always found nowhere near where they should be. More static. Then I heard, when the reception drops, that is where the radio shrieked. A sharp burst of interference screamed through the speakers so loudly that I flinched and grabbed the wheel with both hands. My knuckles turned white. The sound cut through my skull like metal scraping metal. Then, beneath the static, the audio changed. It was not the talk show anymore. It was a woman crying. Not soft crying. Not a recording in the distance. It was close, ragged, broken, the kind of sobbing someone makes when they are exhausted from being terrified for too long. It sounded like she was sitting in the middle row of the van, right behind me. I slammed my hand against the power button. The radio went dead. The silence afterward was so thick that I could hear my own breathing. I stared at the dark radio screen. My heart was pounding against my ribs. For a while, I did not move. Then, because I needed to prove to myself that it had only been a strange signal, I pressed the knob again. The talk show came back. The host was laughing at something his guest had said. Everything sounded normal. I let out a nervous laugh, too, but it sounded fake even to me. I told myself it was just a cross signal. Old radios do weird things in the mountains. Signals bounce, static warps sound. There were 100 normal explanations. I held on to that thought and kept driving. A little while later, I needed coffee, partly to stay awake and partly to calm my hands. I pulled into a rundown gas station that looked like it had not been updated since the 1990s. One of the pumps had a handwritten out-of-order sign taped to it. The fluorescent lights above the lot buzzed and flickered like angry insects. Inside, the place smelled like old coffee, motor oil, and wet cardboard. While I filled a paper cup from the coffee machine, I noticed the wall beside it. It was covered in missing person posters, dozens of them. Some were old, faded, and water-damaged. Some looked newer. Faces stared out from the paper in frozen, happy smiles. Men, women, teenagers, one older couple, even a little boy. Some posters offered rewards. Others just said last seen near Highway 97 or missing from northern British Columbia. The sight turned my stomach. The clerk behind the counter was a skinny guy with bloodshot eyes and a grease-stained cap. He did not look up when I set my coffee down. Lots of people go missing around here, huh? I asked. I tried to sound casual, but my voice cracked. People get lost, he muttered. lose their way, don't respect the woods. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were tired but suddenly intense. The cops say it's bears or exposure, he said, leaning closer over the counter. It ain't. I did not answer. There are things out in the high brush, he continued, lowering his voice. Things that don't belong in nature. Bigfoot, skinwalkers, things that mimic voices at night. I stared at him for a second, waiting for him to laugh. He did not. I paid quickly, grabbed my coffee, and left. As I pushed through the door, I tried to make a joke in my own head. If Bigfoot eats me, my sister is never getting her couch. But the joke did not help. The air outside felt heavy and wet. I stepped onto the slick tarmac and looked across the two-lane highway toward the trees. Through the swirling fog, under the dim glow of a broken street lamp, a figure stood at the edge of the forest. It looked like a woman. She wore a long, pale dress. She was completely still, facing me. Before my brain could fully understand what I was seeing, a huge crack of thunder split the sky. Lightning flashed white across everything. I jumped, spilled hot coffee over my hand, and swore loudly. When I looked back, the woman was gone. There was only empty gravel and a black wall of pines. I got in the van and drove away without finishing the coffee. About an hour later, the van died. The dashboard lights flickered. The power steering went heavy. The engine coughed once, then gave up. I coasted to a stop on the shoulder in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no signs of a town. Just road, fog, rain, and trees. I popped the hood and stepped out into the drizzle. After a few useless checks, I guessed the alternator had given up. I knew enough about cars to know that I was not fixing that on the side of the road in the dark. The first vehicle that passed was a large pickup. I waved both arms. It did not slow down. Its high beams blinded me for a second, and then it vanished into the mist. I stood beside the dead van, shivering and cursing under my breath. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights appeared in the fog. A provincial police cruiser pulled up behind me. A large, burly officer got out and shone his flashlight into my eyes. "What's the trouble?" he asked. I explained that my battery was dead and the van had stalled. "You don't want to be stranded out here tonight," he said as he went to his trunk for jumper cables. "Too many people have gone missing on this stretch lately. If you ever break down again, keep your doors locked." That did not make me feel better. He hooked the cables to his cruiser and then to my battery. While we waited, I glanced toward the back seat of his patrol car. The windows were tinted, but the interior light was on. There was a woman sitting in the back, behind the wire cage. She had long, dark hair hanging over her face. She wore something white and torn. I tried to sound normal. "Rough night for her, huh?" I said, nodding toward the cruiser. Kind of weird stopping to help a guy with a dead battery when you've got someone to transport. The officer stopped moving. He looked at me with genuine confusion. "What are you talking about?" "The girl in the back of your cruiser," I said, pointing. He walked back to the car, opened the rear door, and looked inside. The back seat was empty. He turned back to me with an annoyed grunt. "Must be dashboard lights reflecting on the glass," he said. "There's nobody in my car. I'm on solo patrol." My stomach dropped. I did not say another word. As soon as the van started, I thanked him, unhooked the cables, and climbed back behind the wheel. My boots were soaked. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing so fast I could barely think. The rain eventually stopped, but the fog became worse. It turned into a solid wall. I could barely see past my wipers, so I slowed to 20 kilometers an hour. The headlights carved blurry tunnels through the gray, but they did not show enough. Every second felt like waiting for something to appear in front of me. A deer, a fallen tree, a rock slide, a woman in white. My hands cramped from gripping the steering wheel. Then the temperature inside the van dropped. It happened so quickly that I noticed my breath fogging in front of my face. White clouds puffed from my mouth, even though the heater was turned all the way up. I reached toward the vents. Confused, a shadow burst into my headlights. I slammed on the brakes. The tires skidded across the wet asphalt, and the van shrieked to a stop. She was standing in the middle of the lane, less than 10 feet from my bumper. This time, I saw her clearly. The pale dress was a wedding dress. It was filthy, torn at the hem, and caked with dark mud. Her skin was not just pale. It was gray and almost translucent, stretched tight across sharp cheekbones. Her hair hung in wet black strands around her face. But her eyes were the worst. They were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just two empty pits staring through the windshield. The van was silent, except for my breathing. Then, a low, wet, clicking sound came from the dashboard. The woman moved. She did not walk. Her body jerked forward in violent, broken motions, like her bones were being pulled by invisible strings. In less than a second, she was at the driver's side window. Her face pressed flat against the glass. Her jaw dropped open impossibly wide, revealing jagged, rotten teeth. Then, she screamed. The sound was not human. It was tearing metal mixed with a dying animal, loud enough that the glass of the side mirror shattered beside me. I screamed too. I threw the van into reverse. The tires spun wildly on the wet road before catching, sending the vehicle flying backward into the fog. I did not care if I hit a ditch. I did not care if I went over a cliff. I just needed distance between me and that face. After about 100 yards, I slammed the brakes, shifted into drive, and floored the accelerator. I swerved around the place where she had been standing. I did not look back. Not once. I drove for 3 hours with my hands locked on to the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles split and bled. The fog thinned slowly. Then, finally, I saw a glowing motel sign in the distance. It looked like salvation. I pulled in and stumbled into the office. My body shook so badly that I could barely sign the ledger. The clerk kept asking if I was okay, and I kept saying yes, even though I was not. When I got into my room, I locked the door. Then I pushed the heavy dresser in front of it. I closed the curtains, turned on every light, and sat on the edge of the bed with my face in my hands. For the first time in hours, I told myself I was safe. The terror was over. Then the AM radio on the nightstand clicked on. It was not plugged into the wall. Static filled the room. Through it came the low, ragged sobbing of a woman. I stopped breathing. Then, from the dark space under my bed, I heard a wet, familiar clicking sound. Story 3. I keep hearing things in my shower, and I am starting to think I am losing my mind. For context, I live in a tiny, run-down apartment building that has been falling apart slowly for years. Nothing in this place is quiet. Nothing works the way it should. The floors creak even when no one is walking on them. The walls pop and crack whenever the temperature changes, like the whole building is stretching its old bones. In the winter, the pipes scream through the walls so loudly that it sounds like someone is dragging heavy furniture through the plumbing at 3 in the morning. After living there for a while, you stop questioning things. At first, every strange noise made me freeze. I would sit up in bed and listen, trying to decide if someone was walking in the hallway or if the building was just making another one of its awful sounds. But after enough nights of creaks, knocks, groans, and bangs, you get used to it. You learn to blame everything on old pipes, thin walls, bad insulation, or neighbors who do not understand how loud they are. That is why I ignored it the first time. I had come home after a long shift at work. My shoulders hurt, my back was stiff, and my feet felt like they had been crushed inside my shoes all day. I did not even bother making dinner first. I dropped my things, went straight to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and waited for the water to get warm. The bathroom was small and ugly, like the rest of the apartment. The tiles were yellowing, the mirror had dark spots around the edges, and the ceiling above the shower had a brown stain that never seemed to fully dry. The shower head made a sharp hissing sound when the water ran, but the pressure was decent enough, and after a bad day, that was all I cared about. I stepped in and let the warm water run over my neck and shoulders. For a few minutes, it was perfect. The heat relaxed my muscles. Steam rose around me. The rest of the world blurred into the sound of water hitting tile. Then I heard it. Through the hiss of the shower, there was another sound. A long, slow creak. Metal on metal. It sounded exactly like my front door opening. I froze. For a second, I did not move at all. Water ran down my face and into my eyes, but I barely noticed. I stood there, listening, trying to decide if I had really heard what I thought I heard. Maybe one of my neighbors had come home. The walls in that building were thin enough that I could usually hear doors opening and closing in the nearby apartments. Sometimes I could hear people talking if they were close to the wall. Maybe the sound had come from the hall. Maybe someone else's front door had creaked open, and the water had twisted the noise until it sounded like mine. That explanation was good enough for about 2 seconds. Then I heard footsteps. Not shoes. Not boots. Bare feet. A slow pitter-patter moved across the apartment. Soft, damp-sounding steps. They were not hurried. They were not stumbling. They were slow and careful, like whoever had come inside knew exactly where they were going and had all the time in the world. My stomach tightened. I reached out and shut off the water. The bathroom dropped into silence. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing answered. No footsteps. No creak. Not even the normal settling groan of the building. The silence was so complete, it almost felt unnatural. I stood there for a few more seconds, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. I was wet, naked, and standing behind a cheap plastic shower curtain while something might be in my apartment. It was the most helpless I had ever felt. Then, feeling stupid and scared at the same time, I stepped out and wrapped a towel around myself. If someone really had broken in, I was not going to keep hiding in the shower like an idiot. I dried off as quickly as I could, pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, and opened the bathroom door carefully. The apartment looked normal. The hallway was empty. I moved slowly at first, listening for breathing, movement, anything. I checked the living room and half expected to see someone sitting on my couch, waiting for me. No one was there. The kitchen was empty, too. I checked behind the counter, even though no one could have hidden there. Then I went into the bedroom. Empty. I looked in the closet. Under the bed. Behind the bedroom door. I even went back into the bathroom and checked the shower again, as if someone could have slipped in there while I was searching the rest of the apartment. There was nobody. Finally, I went to the front door. The deadbolt was locked. The chain was still pulled tight. The door had not been opened. There was no way someone could have gotten in through it without breaking something, and nothing was broken. I stood there, staring at the lock. If someone had come in, they had not come through the front door, and they had not left through it either. I was ready to blame the whole thing on the building's terrible acoustics when something caught my eye. A little ceramic bowl was sitting on the floor near the entryway wall. I frowned. The bowl was beige, chipped around the rim, and ugly in a boring way. It had been in the apartment since the day I moved in. I assumed the previous tenant had left it behind. It was not nice enough to use, but not bad enough to throw away. For some reason, I had kept it. Most of the time, it sat on the coffee table and held my keys. Now it was on the floor by the wall, resting on its side. I picked it up and looked at it for a moment. I did not remember moving it. I put it back on the coffee table where it belonged. Guess the ghost came back for his bowl, I muttered. I even smiled when I said it. Looking back, I wish I had taken that joke more seriously. After that, I checked the windows. Every single one was shut. The cheap little latches were still locked. There were no scratches on the frames, no gaps, no signs that anyone had climbed in or out. Eventually, I laughed at myself. Not because it was funny, but because I felt embarrassed. I had worked a 10-hour shift, skipped lunch, and jumped into a hot shower the second I got home. I was tired. The building was old. The walls were thin. Running water can do strange things to sound. I had probably heard one of my neighbors come home. My brain had filled in the rest. That explanation made enough sense that I forgot about it until the next night. The next evening followed the same routine. I came home from work, threw my keys and bag onto the couch, and went straight to the shower. I let the water warm up, stepped in, and stood under the stream while the heat eased my aching arms and legs. For a few minutes, everything was peaceful. Then I heard it again. That same slow groan of metal. My front door. I closed my eyes and sighed. "Nope," I said out loud. "I am not going out there. I do not know why I said it. Maybe I wanted to convince myself I was not scared. Maybe I hoped that if something was really there, it would hear me and leave me alone." A second later, the footsteps started. This time, they were faster. Bare feet moved from the front door area toward the kitchen. One step, then another, then another. I stared at the shower curtain, every muscle in my body locked tight. The water kept running over me, but it suddenly felt too loud, too hot, too much. I do not know why I did it, but I reached for the faucet and shut the water off. The second the stream stopped, the footsteps stopped too. No fading sound, no running, no door, just silence. I stood there waiting. 30 seconds passed, then a minute, then 5. Nothing happened. Finally, I forced myself to get out. I dried off, got dressed, and searched the apartment again. Every room, every corner, every stupid hiding place that made no sense. Empty. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except for the bowl. It was sitting in the middle of the hallway, several feet away from the coffee table. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered, "I really need more sleep." I picked it up and put it back where it belonged. Ironically, I barely slept at all that night. I could explain the sound of the door. I could explain the footsteps, maybe. Old buildings do weird things. Sounds carry. Pipes pop. Neighbors move around. The mind exaggerates. But the bowl was different. There was no good reason for it to be in the hallway. No pet had knocked it down. No breeze had pushed it. No one had been inside. Nothing I came up with felt convincing enough. By morning, though, I had almost talked myself out of it. Maybe I had kicked it without noticing. Maybe I had moved it days earlier while cleaning and only thought it had been on the table. Memory is strange. People remember things wrong all the time. Still, something about the whole situation kept bothering me. Not enough to make me believe my apartment was haunted. Not yet. But enough that I wanted to prove to myself I was being ridiculous. So after work that evening, I decided to run a little experiment. I went into the bathroom, turned on the shower full force, and left the room. Then I hid in my bedroom. I stood near the doorway with my heart beating too fast, waiting to hear the creak of the front door. If someone or something only came when the shower was running, then I wanted to catch it in the act. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 3, nothing, no metal creak, no footsteps, no door opening, just the sound of water hitting porcelain. I let out a breath and shook my head. See? I whispered to myself. You're just crazy. I felt ridiculous. I had actually stood in my bedroom like some scared little kid, waiting for an imaginary intruder to appear because of a misplaced bowl. I walked back to the bathroom, reached in, and shut the water off. That should have settled it. It should have made me feel better. It did not. The next day, I stayed late at work to finish paperwork I had been avoiding all week. By the time I clocked out, I was already 20 minutes late for a date. I had been looking forward to it. It was the first date in months that I actually cared about, and the last thing I wanted was to stand in my bathroom wondering if my apartment had developed a personality. So I hurried home, threw my bag onto the couch, peeled off my work clothes, and jumped into the shower. I did not even think about the experiment. Not at first. Then I heard it. The front door. That slow groan of metal. Then the footsteps. Bare feet. One after another. I swore under my breath. Not tonight. I reached over and shut off the water. Silence. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter, and the sound made me jump so hard I almost slipped. Against every instinct telling me not to take my eyes off the bathroom door, I turned and grabbed the phone. 2 messages from my date. Running late? Everything okay? It could not have taken more than 2 seconds to read them. I typed quickly, "Sorry, be there soon." Then I put the phone back on the counter. When I looked up, the bathroom door was open. Not all the way, just 3 or 4 inches. But I knew it had been closed before. I stared at the gap, trying to force a normal explanation into place. Maybe I had not closed it properly. Maybe the hinges were uneven. My apartment was old. Doors drift sometimes, don't they? The hallway beyond the door was lit by the warm lamp in the living room. That narrow strip of light seemed too still. I remember standing there, staring at it, waiting for something. I do not even know what. Maybe I was waiting for the door to move again. Instead, something shifted just beyond the crack. It was only there for a second. A flicker of movement. Pale, thin, gone before I could focus on it. Then came the unmistakable sound of a switch. Click, the hallway light went out. Darkness swallowed the gap beneath the door. For one long moment, all I could hear was the steady hiss of the shower. My hand found the faucet almost by instinct, and I twisted it shut. Silence. The bathroom door was closed again. I do not remember getting dressed after that. Not clearly. I know I did, because I left the apartment. I remember grabbing my phone and keys with shaking hands. I remember refusing to look too closely at the hallway. I remember walking out the front door and checking the lock twice before leaving. The rest of the night almost felt normal. My date noticed I was quiet, but I blamed it on work. He did not push. We had dinner. He talked. I answered when I had to. I tried to smile in the right places. I tried not to think about my apartment, about the bathroom, about the door. After dinner, we went back to his place. Any other night, I probably would have been excited. He was kind, funny, and good-looking in a soft, careful way. His apartment was clean and warm. It smelled like laundry detergent and coffee. It felt safe. But I could not fully relax. Every time the floor creaked, I turned my head. Every time a car passed outside and light moved across the wall, my body tensed. At some point, I curled up on the edge of his bed, still fully dressed, while he scrolled through something on his phone beside me. Eventually, he turned off the lamp. The room went dark. I remember thinking I should get up, I should go home, I should sleep in my own bed like a normal person. But the thought of walking back into my apartment, turning on the lights, and passing that bathroom door made my stomach twist. So I stayed. I fell asleep in his bed with my clothes on. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was cutting through the blinds. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. I did not remember being afraid. I did not remember the shower. I did not remember the door. Then it all came back. My phone was dead on the floor beside the bed. My date was still asleep next to me, breathing slow and steady. I sat up carefully, trying not to wake him. I told myself that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe all of it really was stress, lack of sleep, and a bad week. Then I saw something on the nightstand. A small ceramic bowl. Beige, chipped along the rim, sitting perfectly upright in the morning light. I did not move at first. I just stared at it. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. That bowl should have been in my apartment. It should have been on my coffee table, holding my keys. I had left it there. I knew I had left it there. But now, it was here, in someone else's apartment, beside the bed where I had slept. I reached for it slowly, as if touching it might make it vanish. The ceramic was cold under my fingers. Real, solid, familiar A sound escaped my throat. Not quite a scream and not quite a breath. My date stirred beside me. "You okay?" He mumbled, still half asleep. I could not answer. Because as I held that ugly little bowl in my hands, something else became horribly clear. Whatever had been moving through my apartment when I showered had not stayed there. It had followed me. Or maybe it had never been tied to the apartment at all. Maybe it was tied to me. I looked toward the bedroom door. It was open just a few inches. Beyond it, the hallway was dark. And from somewhere out there, soft and slow against the floor, I heard the sound of bare feet. Story 4. Where is this place? And what am I doing here? The boy in white whispered to himself. He stood in the middle of a wide road, surrounded by tall buildings that reached up into a bright, pale sky. The buildings had glass fronts, straight walls, shining windows, and signs he did not recognize. The road spread in all directions, wide and busy, with cars rushing past and people moving quickly along the footpaths. Some people were wearing school uniforms. Others were dressed for office work, carrying suitcases, bags, and files. No one seemed to have time to stop. Everyone was in a hurry, as if they were late for something very important. The boy looked down at himself. He was dressed completely in white. A white shirt, white trousers, white shoes. Even the small cloth tied around his wrists was white. His clothes looked too clean for the dusty street around him, almost as if he had stepped out of a dream and into the wrong world. A loud horn suddenly blasted behind him. The boy jumped and turned around. A driver had stopped his car only a few feet away. He leaned out of the window, his face red with anger. "Hey, are you blind?" The driver shouted. "Why are you standing in the middle of the road? Move!" The boy blinked at him, confused. "Oh, sorry," he said quickly. He stepped away from the road and walked onto the footpath. The car sped past him, and the driver shook his head as if the boy was mad. The boy stood there for a moment, trying to understand how he had arrived in this place. He had no memory of walking there, no memory of getting off a bus or crossing a street, no memory of waking up. He simply was there, standing in the road with the world moving around him like it had always known where to go. Why did I come here? He wondered. He tapped his finger against his cheek and looked upward as he walked. The sun was bright, but it did not feel warm. The light was clear, almost flat, and it made the glass buildings shine in a strange way. Every reflection looked slightly wrong, like the world inside the glass was a second behind the real one. He kept walking. Then his eyes landed on a school bus, stopped near the side of the road. A mother stood beside it, helping a small child climb the steps. The child wore a neat uniform and carried a bag nearly as big as his back. As the child climbed inside, the mother leaned forward and asked, "Where is your brother?" The word struck the boy like a hand against his chest. "Brother?" He stopped walking. His lips parted slightly. "Brother," he whispered. "Yes, I remember now." A thought rose inside him, faint at first, then stronger. He had come here for someone. He had come to find his brother. "Yes," he said to himself. "I came here to find my brother. He must be at the hostel." The moment he said it, the idea felt true. His brother had gone far away to study. Their family had not wanted him to leave, but he had insisted. He had been stubborn. Always stubborn. Or maybe that was not right. Maybe the boy in white was the stubborn one. The memory was unclear, like a picture seen through fog. Still, he had a direction now. He began walking again, his bright white clothes standing out sharply among the crowd. People brushed past him without looking. Their shoulders hit him, their bags bumped against his arm, but no one apologized. The city moved around him, fast and careless. After walking for some time, he reached a large hospital. The building stood tall and wide, with glass doors, white walls, and a red sign above the entrance. Ambulances were parked outside. People moved in and out through the doors, but something about the place felt wrong even before he entered. The boy looked at the hospital and frowned. This hospital wasn't at the hostel entrance, he said quietly. He looked around, hoping to see another road or a gate, but the hospital seemed to block the way forward. The footpath led directly toward it. The people around him flowed through the doors like water. After hesitating for a moment, he went inside. The hospital was full of movement. Doctors hurried from one hallway to another. Nurses walked fast with files in their hands. Ward boys pushed empty stretchers at a speed that made the wheels squeak. The strange thing was that there seemed to be more doctors than patients. The waiting room looked full when the boy first entered, but every time he turned his head and looked again, a chair that had been occupied a moment before became empty. A woman crying near the wall vanished when he looked away. A man holding his stomach disappeared behind a door that had not opened. A child sitting on his mother's lap was gone the next time the boy glanced at the seats. The boy's skin grew cold, even though sweat began to form on his forehead. The hospital smelled like antiseptic, dust, and something old underneath it. The floor was too clean. The lights above were too bright. The doctors moved too quickly, yet their faces were blank, as if they were only pretending to be busy. He walked deeper into the hospital, trying to find a way out. He climbed a staircase, thinking it might lead to another exit. It only led to more hallways. He went back down, then tried another passage. Doors lined both sides. Some had numbers. Some had no names at all. Through one small window, he saw an empty bed. Through another, he saw only white light. Through another, he saw a room full of chairs facing the wall. His heart began beating faster. "How do I get out of here?" he whispered. He walked faster, then ran. He climbed stairs, came back down, turned into corridors, opened doors, closed them again, and peeked through windows. Every hallway looked almost the same. Every turn seemed to lead him back into the hospital instead of away from it. His white clothes started sticking to his skin with sweat. Then a voice spoke behind him. "Where do you need to go?" The boy turned sharply. A security guard stood a few steps away. He wore a dark uniform and a cap pulled low over his forehead. His face was calm, but his eyes were too still. The boy felt a little relief anyway. A guard was someone who could help. A guard knew the way. "There was a hostel here," the boy said. "I need to go there." The guard nodded, as if the answer made perfect sense. "Yes, it is here," he said. "But where?" "Come this way." The boy did not understand that answer, but he followed. The guard led him through a hallway that seemed quieter than the rest of the hospital. The sound of rushing doctors faded behind them. The lights hummed overhead. On the walls were old notices written in languages the boy could not read properly. Some of the paper looked fresh. Some looked yellow with age. Soon they reached a reception area. Another guard was seated behind the counter, where a receptionist should have been. He had a large journal open in front of him. A pen lay beside it. The pages were thick and yellowish, filled with names, numbers, and marks that looked like signatures but could not quite be read. The boy slowed down. Something about the counter made him nervous. The guard walking with him noticed. "Don't be afraid," he said. "They are all just busy today. That is why we have been placed at the reception." The explanation did not make much sense, but the boy nodded. When they reached the counter, the guard leaned forward and whispered something into the ear of the guard seated there. The seated guard looked up at the boy in white. His face did not change. "So," he said, "you want to go to the other side?" "The other side?" The boy repeated. "I need to go to my brother's hostel," he explained. "My family didn't want him to leave, but he insisted on coming all the way here to study." The standing guard tilted his head. "Was that your brother?" he asked. The boy frowned. "Yes, of course." The seated guard nodded slowly, then turned the journal toward him. Fine, sign here," he said. "Then we will show you the way." The boy looked at the page. "Sign? Just to meet my brother?" A man in a suit stepped closer from the side. The boy had not noticed him before. He wore a dark suit, neat shoes, and carried a small diary in one hand. He looked like an office clerk, but there was something old-fashioned about him. His hair was combed too neatly. His face was difficult to remember even while looking at it. "Just sign it," the man said. Anyone who wants to go to the other side has to sign. The boy hesitated. He did not like this. He did not understand why he had to sign anything. But the hospital already felt like a maze, and the guards seemed to know the way. If a signature was all it took to get to the hostel, maybe it was better not to argue. "All right, then," he said. He picked up the pen and pressed it to the page. Nothing happened. He moved the pen across the paper again. Still nothing. No ink, no line, not even a scratch. "It's not working," he said. The seated guard looked at the pen, then at him. "No problem," he said. "You can go now." The boy felt a little relieved, but before he could step away, the man in the suit held out his small diary. "While you are here," the man said, "sign this too." The boy looked at the diary. "What is this?" The man in the suit gave him a patient smile. "Don't you remember? You came to sign into the registry." The boy stared at him. "Registry? I don't remember any registry." The man smiled wider. "People rarely do." The boy studied his face carefully. There was something familiar about him. Not enough to recognize, but enough to disturb him. "You look familiar," the boy said. "But I don't even live here." "I come from the same city you come from," the man replied. "Then why are you here?" the boy asked. "And what is this signature for?" "I don't understand anything." He took the pen from the man and tried to write in the small diary. Again, it did not work. "Wait," the boy said. "This pen isn't working either." "No matter," the man in the suit said. "Just put your thumbprint." He opened an ink pad and held it out. The boy looked at the black ink. It shone wetly under the bright hospital light. He pressed his thumb into it. The ink felt cold. "Where should I put it?" he asked. "Here," the man said, pointing to a blank page. The boy leaned closer. "But nothing is written here," he said. "No name, no number. Nothing. You haven't told us those things yet," the man replied. The seated guard suddenly shouted from behind the counter, "Hurry up and move." The boy flinched. Without thinking further, he pressed his thumb onto the blank page. Then he pulled his hand away. The thumbprint on the page was completely smooth. No lines, no pattern, just a dark oval mark. His breath caught. He turned his thumb toward his face. The ink had stained his skin, but the lines on his thumb were gone. He rubbed it with his other hand, panic rising in his chest. Then he looked at his palms. There were no lines anywhere. No fingerprints, no palm lines, nothing. His hands were smooth, almost unfinished, like the hands of a statue. "What is this?" he whispered. The man in the suit closed the diary. "Details are not necessary," he said, "not until someone remembers who they are." Then he slipped the diary into his pocket and walked into the crowd. The boy tried to follow him with his eyes, but the man disappeared among the moving doctors and guards as if he had never been there. The first guard touched the boy's shoulder. "It is time," he said. "I will take you to the hostel." The boy wanted to ask more questions. He wanted to demand the diary back. He wanted to know what had happened to his hands. But the thought of his brother returned, and with it came a strong pull, almost like a rope tied around his chest. His brother. He had to find his brother. The guard led him to a staircase. "We have to climb," the guard said. "The hostel is above this?" the boy asked. "Yes," the guard replied. So they climbed. 1 floor, 2 floors, 3. The boy thought the hostel would appear after the next landing, but it did not. They kept climbing. The staircase twisted upward without end. The walls were white. The railing was cold under the boy's hand. Every floor looked the same, with closed doors, flickering lights, and the faint smell of hospital disinfectant. After several floors, the boy's legs began to ache. After several more, his lungs burned. His white clothes were soaked with sweat. His hair stuck to his forehead. He kept looking up, expecting to see the end of the stairs, but there was always another flight. How much longer? He panted. We're almost there, the guard said. He said it calmly, as if he had not said the same thing several times already. The boy did not know how long they climbed. It felt like hours, maybe minutes, maybe years. Time had become slippery inside the staircase. At last, they reached the top. A door opened, and the boy stepped out into open air. He looked around. It was a roof. There was no hostel, only the wide, flat roof of the hospital, surrounded by a low wall. The sky above was too bright, almost white. The city stretched all around them, but from up there it looked silent and still, like a model city made of glass and concrete. This is just the roof, the boy said. The guard pointed across the roof. There was a small door there, standing by itself. It looked like it should lead into a tiny storage room. The path is through there, the guard said. The boy looked at him, unsure. Is there really a path through this? The guard said nothing. The boy walked to the small door. His hand shook as he reached for the handle. He opened it. A brilliant white light burst out. It was so bright that it swallowed everything. The boy cried out and covered his eyes. His whole body became only a white shape inside a greater whiteness. What is this? He shouted. Then he felt a powerful kick in his back. He fell forward. But there was no floor. He dropped into the light. As he tumbled, memories flashed through him. He saw two babies lying side by side on a bed, their tiny fingers wrapped around each other. He heard voices laughing softly above them. He heard his parents choosing names. One name for one child, one name for the other. He saw himself and his brother as small children playing with toys on the floor. He saw them crying together after being scolded. He saw them laughing under a blanket when they were supposed to be sleeping. He saw one of them running ahead while the other shouted to wait. He saw school uniforms, shared food, fights, apologies, a hand reaching out in the dark. Then the memories twisted. Which one was he? Which one was his brother? The light vanished. The boy hit the ground. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on hard earth between tall, narrow buildings. Drains flowed nearby, carrying dirty water through broken channels. The buildings were packed so closely together that only a thin piece of moon could be seen above. The air smelled of damp walls, old food, and sewage. He sat up slowly. His body hurt, but he was alive. He pushed me, he muttered. Then he looked around, and his eyes widened. This, he whispered. This looks like my brother's hostel. The place was not a clean hostel with signs and rooms and students laughing in halls. It was a crowded maze of small rooms, staircases, balconies, and dark corners. Clothes hung from ropes. Doors stood half open. Old bulbs flickered above narrow passages. Somewhere, water dripped steadily into a metal bucket. The boy stood and began running. He ran from room to room, opening doors and looking inside. Some rooms were empty. Some had beds with no mattresses. Some had walls covered in writing he could not read. He climbed stairs, then came back down. He shouted his brother's name, but the name changed every time it left his mouth. Sometimes he shouted one name, sometimes another. Sometimes no sound came out at all. "Brother," he cried. "Where are you?" His voice echoed through the narrow building. No one answered. He kept searching until his legs shook and his throat hurt. Finally, when he could run no more, he stopped in a dark corner near the back of the building. Someone was standing there. A figure dressed completely in black. His back was turned. The boy in white stared at him, unable to move. The figure's shoulders looked familiar. The shape of his head, the way he stood. Something about him pulled at the boy's memory. Slowly, the boy stepped closer. He reached out and placed a hand on the man's shoulder. The man in black turned around. The boy in white stumbled back in shock. "You," he whispered. "You look just like me." The man in black stared at him with the same face, but older, or younger, or both. His eyes were wild with fear. "Yes," the man shouted. "I have been looking for you for so long." "Why?" the boy in white asked. "I am looking for my brother." He stopped. His eyes widened. "Yes," he said slowly. "You are my brother." The man in black shook his head violently. "What? No, I thought this was the world of my own mind. I was looking for my mind so I could escape from here." The boy in white frowned. "What are you saying?" "You are my younger brother, but I clearly look older than you," the man in black said. "Yes," the boy in white replied, touching his head as another memory slipped away. "But I am starting to remember. Maybe I am the younger one." The man in black stepped back. "No, I remember something else. I remember that I never even had a brother." The words fell between them like stones. The boy in white shook his head. "That cannot be true." "Then who are you?" the man in black demanded. "I don't know," the boy whispered. The man in black grabbed his own head with both hands. "Am I your mind?" he asked. "Have you been searching for me all these years?" "No," the boy in white said quickly. "No. Maybe I am the brother you came to find." "No." The man in black shouted. "No." The boy in white shouted back. Both of them began speaking at once. "You are my brother. You are my mind. I came to find you. I came to escape. You were lost. I was never born. I remember you. I remember being alone." The boy in white sank to the ground and clutched his head. "Did my brother never exist?" he cried. The man in black sat down too, shaking. "Is this the real world?" he asked. "Is it a dream?" The boy in white whispered. "Or is it the afterlife?" the man in black said. The two of them stared at each other, both wearing the same face in different ages, both full of memories that fought each other and broke apart every time they tried to hold them. Then they started screaming. Their clothes began to change. The boy's white shirt flashed black for one moment, then turned white again. The man's black clothes flickered into white, then back to black. Their faces shifted. One became older, then younger. The other became younger, then older. Their voices rose and fell, sometimes sounding like children, sometimes like grown men, sometimes like the same person speaking from two mouths. The world around them flickered too. The hostile walls became hospital walls. The hospital became the busy road. The road became the roof. The roof became darkness. Then all of it folded back into the cramped, hostile corner, where the two figures sat on the ground, screaming and changing. The guards stood around them. So did the man in the suit. They watched, without surprise. One guard sighed. Again, the man in the suit opened his small diary, looked at the blank page, then closed it. "No name," he said. Another guard looked down at the two figures. No memories. The seated guard from the reception appeared beside them, though there was no reception here. No fingerprints, he said. The first guard shook his head. Still no identity. The man in the suit tucked the diary under his arm. Then we wait, he said. The guards turned and walked away, their footsteps fading into the narrow lanes between the buildings. The man in the suit followed them, disappearing into the dark like a shadow being pulled back into a wall. Behind them, the two strangers remained on the floor. They kept asking each other the same question. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Neither of them noticed that with every passing moment, their clothes were no longer white or black. They were turning gray. Story 5. I always thought of myself as an average man. There was nothing special about me, at least not in the way people usually mean it. I did not have a powerful job. I was not rich. I did not have the kind of face that made people look twice when I walked into a room. I was not charming in some loud, obvious way. I did not have a big group of friends, a fancy car, or a life that anyone would envy from the outside. I was just normal. Plain, even. A man who woke up, went to work, came home, ate dinner, watched television, and tried not to think too much about the things that had happened before. If you passed me in a grocery store, you would forget my face by the time you reached the next aisle. If you stood behind me in line at a coffee shop, you would never feel the need to mention me later. I looked like nobody. And for most of my life, that suited me. Being average is useful. People underestimate average men. They do not follow them with their eyes. They do not imagine them doing terrible things. They do not hear a quiet voice and think there might be something rotten underneath it. They look at a man like me and see someone harmless, someone forgettable, someone safe. That was one of the reasons I survived as long as I did. But there was one part of my life that made me feel lucky. My wife. Veronica, even now, when I say her name in my mind, it feels too soft for everything that happened. Veronica was the kind of woman people noticed without meaning to. She had long brown hair that fell over her shoulders in loose waves, and when sunlight touched it, small golden strands appeared in it like fire hidden in wood. Her skin always looked warm, like she had spent her whole life beneath summer sun. Her eyes were hazel, but that word does not really do them justice. In normal light, they were lovely enough. In sunlight, they changed. Green, gold, brown, all mixed together, catching the light in a way that made strangers compliment her before they even realized they were speaking. But Veronica was more than beautiful. That was the part that always made me feel like I had gotten away with something. She was sweet, truly sweet. Not the fake kind people put on when they want something. She cared about everyone. Too much, maybe. She cried during sad commercials. She remembered birthdays. She brought soup to neighbors when they were sick. She listened when people talked, really listened, with her whole face. When she loved someone, she loved completely. She was empathetic. She was gentle. She was trusting. Naive, too. Gullible, if I am being honest. That was not meant as an insult. It was part of her charm. Veronica believed people were mostly good. She believed lies only came from pain or fear. She believed everyone had reasons for what they did, and if you understood those reasons, you could forgive almost anything. I loved that about her. Or maybe I loved what it allowed me to do. For a long time, she was my greatest companion. She made the house feel alive. Before her, my home had always felt like a place where I kept my body between shifts at work. After she moved in, there were flowers on the kitchen table. There were blankets folded on the couch. There were photos on the walls. She lit candles in the evenings and played soft music while she cooked. She made little routines out of nothing. Coffee together on Sunday mornings. Walks after dinner. Movies on Friday nights, even if we both fell asleep halfway through. She made everything look normal. She made me look normal. I liked that most of all. When we first met, she did not ask many hard questions. That was another thing I liked about her. She was curious about my favorite foods, my work, my childhood, my habits, the little boring details couples ask when they are learning each other. But she did not push into the dark corners. Not at first. I told her I had lived alone for years. That was true. I told her I had not had many serious relationships before her. That was not exactly true, but it was close enough if I shaped the words right. I told her I did not like talking about the past. That was very true. She respected that for a while. Veronica had grief of her own. She carried it quietly, but I noticed. Sometimes she would go still for no clear reason. Her smile would fade while she washed a dish or folded laundry, and her eyes would drift toward some place I could not see. Sometimes, late at night, she talked about a friend she had lost years before. Not dead, not officially. Missing, gone, without explanation. She never told the story the same way twice, but the pain in it was always the same. Her best friend had vanished. No goodbye, no final message, no body, no answer. Veronica said they had been close once, closer than sisters. They had shared secrets, clothes, dreams, fears. They had been young together in that intense way girls can be, where friendship feels like a promise against the whole world. Then one day, the friend was gone. I never asked too many questions. That would have been dangerous. Instead, I listened like a good husband. I held her hand. I told her I was sorry. I told her some things never get a clean ending. She would lean against my shoulder and cry softly, and I would stroke her hair until she fell asleep. For a while, that worked. Then, she started digging into my past. I do not know what set it off exactly. Maybe marriage made her feel she had the right to know everything about me. Maybe her grief grew sharper the safer she felt. Maybe she had always been looking, quietly, and I only noticed once she got too close. At first, it was small. She asked why I never had old photos around. I told her I was not sentimental. She asked why I never talked to people from before. I told her I moved a lot and lost touch. She asked if I had ever been engaged. I said no. That was a mistake. Not because she knew I was lying at the time, but because the lie taught her where to look. Veronica was naive in some ways, but she was not stupid. People confuse those things. They think trusting people are easy to fool forever. They are not. Trusting people notice betrayal deeply because they spend their lives trying not to expect it. She started asking more. Old addresses, old jobs, past relationships. She said it was normal for married people to know these things. She said she did not want secrets between us. She said I knew all about her pain, all about her missing friend, all about the empty space that had followed her for years, and yet I gave her almost nothing in return. I told her there was nothing to know. She did not believe me. That was when things began to go wrong. Not all at once. Veronica did not scream or accuse me in the beginning. She watched. She listened. She asked questions that sounded harmless, but were placed too carefully. She said names of towns I had not mentioned and watched my face. She asked about dates. She asked whether I had ever lived near the coast, whether I had ever known a woman named Claire, whether I had ever been married before. The question came one evening while we were making dinner. I was chopping onions. She was stirring sauce at the stove. The kitchen smelled like garlic and tomatoes. It was one of those ordinary little moments that should have stayed ordinary. Then she asked, "Were you ever married before me?" My hand stopped for less than a second. Not long, but long enough. "No," I said. She turned the heat down on the stove. "You sure?" I smiled, but I could feel my jaw tighten. That's a strange question. It is a simple question, and I gave you an answer. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt something cold move between us. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. After that, the house changed. She did not confront me directly for a few days. That was worse. She became quiet. Not angry quiet. Thinking quiet. Searching quiet. I caught her looking at my laptop once when she thought I was in the shower. I found one of my old boxes moved slightly from where I had left it in the closet. My papers were not exactly out of order, but they were too neat. Veronica had touched them. I should have been more careful. I should have gotten rid of everything. But people make mistakes when they get comfortable. Even average men with careful habits. Especially when they start to believe love has hidden them. One night, we argued. It started over something small. I do not even remember what. Dishes, maybe, or the way I had snapped at her earlier. But like most arguments, it quickly became about the thing we were really avoiding. She stood in the living room with tears in her eyes, asking me why I could not just tell her the truth. I told her there was no truth to tell. She said, "Stop lying to me." I told her to leave it alone. She said, "Who was she?" That question landed like a stone. I asked what she meant. She said, "Your first wife." I felt something inside me shift. For a moment, I considered denying it again. But I was tired. Tired of her questions. Tired of the careful little looks. Tired of pretending she was not getting closer and closer to something she should never have touched. So I snapped. "Fine," I said. "Yes, I had an ex-wife." "Are you happy now?" Veronica went still. "What was her name?" I should have stopped. I should have walked away. Instead, I said it. "Alika." The room became silent. I watched her face carefully, expecting anger, maybe hurt, maybe shock that I had kept something so big from her. What I saw instead was harder to read. Her eyes widened slightly, but she did not say anything at first. "Alika?" she repeated. "Yes, what was her full name?" I felt irritation rise in me. It does not matter. It was a long time ago. What was her full name? "No, tell me." That was when I shouted at her. I told her she was obsessed. I told her she was ruining our marriage by chasing ghosts. I told her the past was dead and should stay dead. She flinched when I said that last part, and for a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. After the argument, she stopped asking questions. That should have made me nervous, but instead I felt relieved. I thought maybe she had finally understood that pushing me was dangerous for us. I thought she had gotten enough of the truth to satisfy whatever need had taken hold of her. I thought she was done being obsessed with Alika. For a few days, things were almost normal again. Veronica cooked dinner. She smiled at me. She kissed me before bed. She spoke in a soft voice. She did not mention my ex-wife. I let myself relax. That was another mistake. One afternoon, I came home from work and found her sitting on the floor of our bedroom. The closet door was open. One of my old storage boxes sat beside her. Her back was toward me at first, and I could see her shoulders shaking. For one stupid moment, I thought she was laughing. Then she turned. She was holding a photograph. Her face was red. Tears poured down her cheeks. Her lips trembled so hard she could barely speak. Both hands gripped the photo like it might disappear if she loosened her fingers. I knew which photo it was before I saw it. Alika, younger, smiling, alive. The photograph had been folded once and hidden in an envelope beneath old tax papers. I had kept it for reasons I never fully understood. Not love, not guilt, exactly. Maybe proof, maybe memory. Maybe because getting rid of it felt too much like admitting the past had mattered. Veronica looked up at me with those hazel eyes full of horror. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. I did not answer. Her voice broke. "This is her." I stayed in the doorway. "Who?" She looked at me like I had stabbed her, my best friend. For a few seconds, the world seemed to stop. Then everything clicked into place. All her stories, all the descriptions, the little details I had heard for years while pretending to be only a patient husband listening to grief. The brown hair, the laugh, the scar near the wrist, the way she used to sing badly in the car, the way she disappeared one summer without a word. Alika, of course. It made sense immediately, and that was what made it so strange. I should have seen it long before. Veronica's missing friend had always sounded familiar. I just never cared enough to fit the pieces together. Why would I? To me, Alika belonged to the past. Veronica belonged to the present. They lived in different rooms in my mind, and I had kept the doors closed. Still, something bothered me. Veronica always made it sound like they had been inseparable. Alika had never mentioned her. Not once. Not in all the time I knew her. Not during the marriage. Not during the fights. Not during the long final weeks when everything between us had turned sharp and ugly. If Veronica had been so important, why had Alika never said her name? I almost asked that. But then I saw the way Veronica was looking at me, and another feeling rose inside me. Not fear, not guilt, something close to amusement. I know that is not the reaction a normal person should have. A normal husband, caught in a terrible secret, should feel panic. A normal man should drop to his knees, beg forgiveness, make excuses, deny everything. But the whole thing suddenly felt absurd. My sweet Veronica. My naive, trusting, grief-filled wife. She had been mourning my ex-wife all these years. She had slept beside the man who knew exactly where her missing friend had gone. And she had not known. The thought was almost funny. No, it was funny. I tried not to smile, but I could feel it pulling at my mouth. Veronica saw it. Her tears came harder. "What did you do?" she asked. Her voice was small, too small. I walked into the room and closed the door behind me. "You really want to know?" She did not answer. She only stared at me, clutching the photograph to her chest. I stepped closer. "You have been digging for so long," I said. "You should be proud. You found something. Did you hurt her?" I laughed then. A short laugh. Not loud, but real. Veronica flinched. "Come with me," I said. She did not move. I held out my hand. "If you want the truth, come with me." For a moment, I thought she would scream. I thought she would run. I thought she would finally understand that she had opened a door she should have left locked. but she stood. Her legs were shaking, but she stood. I took her downstairs. The house was quiet around us, the kind of quiet that feels deep and waiting. I led her through the kitchen, past the laundry room and to the basement door. She followed close behind me, breathing in short, broken pulls. The photo was still in her hand. I unlocked the basement. The smell came up first. Not strong, not anymore. I had been careful for years. But there are some smells that never fully leave a place. Damp concrete, old wood, rust, earth, the faint sweetness of things that had once been alive and were not anymore. Veronica stopped at the top of the stairs. "No," she whispered. I looked back at her. You wanted to know. She shook her head, but she came down anyway. One step, then another. The basement light flickered when I pulled the cord. Yellow light spread over concrete walls, shelves of paint cans, old tools, and the locked storage room at the far end. That room had been there before I bought the house. A small room built under the back porch, with thick walls and no windows. Whoever made it had used it for storage. I had found a better use. Veronica was crying again, but she was quiet now. I unlocked the storage room door and opened it. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. That is common. The mind protects itself for a few seconds. When it sees something it cannot accept, it turns shapes into objects. It tells you that a body is a pile of clothes, that bones are sticks, that hair is old rope. Then understanding arrived. Veronica made a sound I had never heard from her before. It was not a scream. It was more like the air had been pulled out of her soul. Alika was there. What was left of her? Time changes people after death. It takes beauty and makes it quiet. It dries softness. It hollows the places that once held laughter and anger and breath. But there were still things a person could recognize if they had loved someone enough. Hair, a ring, the shape of a jaw, the remains of a bracelet around one wrist. Veronica stared. Her whole body went still. I waited for the collapse, the scream, the attack, the desperate hands clawing at my face. I waited for the moment she became what I expected her to become. But it did not happen. She looked stunned at first. Then, something changed. Her shoulders stopped shaking. Her breathing slowed. She wiped her cheeks with the back of one hand. Her eyes moved over the room, over Alika, then back to me. And then she smiled. Not a small smile, not a broken smile. A bright, trembling smile full of relief. I felt my own smile fade. "Veronica?" She turned to me and stepped forward. Before I could ask what was happening, she threw her arms around my neck and kissed me. It was not the kind of kiss a terrified woman gives when she is trying to survive. It was not stiff or forced. It was deep, passionate, desperate. She kissed me harder than she ever had before, pressing herself against me while her tears wet my face. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. "I knew," she whispered. I stared at her. "What?" "I knew it was you." For the first time in years, I felt truly confused. She laughed softly. The sound echoed strangely in the basement. "I have known for a long time," she said. "Not at first, but after we met, after I started learning about you, after I saw the dates and the places, I knew. I knew you were the reason she disappeared." I took a step back. Her hands stayed on my chest. "All of it," she said. "The questions, the crying, the fear, the arguments. I needed you to admit it, I needed you to show me. I did not speak. I could not. Veronica looked past me into the storage room, and the expression on her face was not grief. Not exactly. It was something warmer, something almost happy. She left me, she said quietly. I frowned. What? Alika left me. Everyone thought she disappeared from the world, but she disappeared from me first. She stopped calling, stopped writing, stopped needing me. She got married and never even told me. Her voice trembled, but not with sadness now. She was my whole life, and I became nothing to her. I remembered then that Alika had never mentioned Veronica, not because they were not close, because Alika had wanted to forget her. Veronica looked back at me. When I found out she was your ex-wife, I thought it had to mean something. When I saw the way you reacted to her name, I knew. And when you smiled upstairs, I knew for sure. She touched my face gently. You kept her. The way she said it sent a chill through me, not because she was horrified, because she sounded moved. I thought you would hate me, I said. Veronica shook her head. No, she kissed me again, softer this time. You gave me an answer, she whispered. Do you know how long I waited for that? Do you know how long I wondered where she went? What happened to her? Whether she ever thought about me? I looked at the remains in the room. She did not, I said. Veronica's smile widened a little. I know. Something in the basement seemed to settle around us. For years, I had thought Veronica's sweetness made her easy to control. I had thought her grief made her weak. I had thought her trust was a door I could walk through whenever I pleased. But I had been wrong. Her tears had been real at some point, maybe. Her grief had been real. But by the time she came into my life, that grief had changed shape. It had become obsession. Then suspicion. Then something darker. Her fear had been fake. Her trembling hands had been part of the performance. Her questions had not been innocent. She had not been trying to escape a monster. She had been trying to make the monster confess. And somehow, it made her love me more. That should have scared me. Maybe it did. But as Veronica stood beside me in that basement, holding my hand while Alika lay in the cold room behind us, I realized something else. For the first time in my life, someone saw me clearly. Not the average man, not the harmless husband, not the forgettable face in the crowd. Me, the real me. And she did not run. She rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, I love you. I looked down at her long brown hair, at her sun-warmed skin, at those hazel eyes that caught the basement light in strange golden flecks. Then I looked at Alika. Then back at my wife. And for the first time since I married Veronica, I wondered what kind of person I had really brought into my house.